Hello again, 240. In this video, I will go over a section in Chapter 8, Sports in an Age of Ballyhoo, Depression, and War, 1920 through 1945. And one of Grantland Rice's important contributions to the transformation of sports into mass spectacle was the attention he paid to the sports of limited mass appeal. Golf had arrived in Americas by the 1890s, as we mentioned, but play was largely restricted to private country clubs. Not surprisingly, the game was widely perceived to be one reserved for the elite. Until the 1920s, even the most important tournaments received relatively little media attention. Tournament sponsors could only offer small prize monies to the professionals. Many of the best golfers were amateurs. Such was the case in 1913 when the 20-year-old son of a Boston gardener and handyman, amateur Francis Ouimet, shocked the two dominant English professionals of the time, Harry Vardon and Ted Ray, in the U.S. Open. The tournament was held in suburban Boston at the country club in Brookline, where Ouimet had once worked as a caddy. Playing in a three-way 18-hole playoff, Ouimet outdueled the Englishman, winning the championship by 5 strokes. Unlike the sparse crowds that had watched previous major American tournaments, an unprecedented crowd, estimated to be over 3,000, trampled over the course following the 3 competitors. Ouimet's stunning victory swept golf onto the front pages of American newspapers. A working-class American had toppled the giants of the world of golf. Although Ouimet continued to play competitively for the next 3 decades, he never won another major tournament, but he had awakened the American people to the exciting possibilities of golf. Middle-class American men and women began to take up the game in the 1920s as public courses opened in most cities, as we mentioned. By 1925, an estimated 2.5 million Americans played the game. Many businessmen, confined to office or store, found relief from job pressures playing in the open air on well-groomed courses that blended grass, sand, water, and trees into bucolic vistas. Businessmen discovered that the golf course was the perfect location for cutting deals and business relationships with clients. During the dry years of Prohibition, members realized the most hospitable place on the grounds was the 19th hole, which featured a well-stocked bar located within the secure confines of a private club. After the First World War, Ouimet gave way to a new generation of golfers. One of those men was Walter Hagen. Born into a middle-class family in Rochester, New York in 1892, that's 60 miles east of my hometown of Buffalo, New York, Hagen became a golf professional at the Country Club of Rochester. This meant that he was expected to earn his living overseeing the entire day-to-day operations, supervising groundskeepers, giving lessons, assigning caddies, and managing the pro shop, club, restaurant, and bar. In 1914, Hagen won the U.S. Open, and more victories followed. His flamboyant, if not arrogant, personality and sharp golfing skills led to the media-inspired nickname Sir Walter. Hagen made golf history in 1922 when he became the first American to win the British Open, and for several years he reigned as the world's greatest golfer, winning 2 more British Opens in 1928 and 1929 and 4 consecutive Professional Golf Association PGA tournaments from 1924 through 27. The flamboyant Hagen attracted widespread public acclaim and helped to democratize the game of golf, as did Arnold Palmer later in the 50s and 60s, as we'll see. Newspaper writers loved him for his celebrity, and fans flocked to his exhibitions where he bantered with members of the gallery and joined them at the bar afterwards. But the charismatic Hagen had to share the spotlight with another public favorite, the unassuming Bobby Jones, son of a prominent Atlanta family. Both men, in their own way, contributed to golf's growing popularity. Jones not only rose to the top of the golfing world, but also graduated from college and law school, passed the Georgia bar, and launched a successful career as a practicing attorney. At a time when many Americans still believed that the true sportsman was an amateur who played for the joy of competition rather than hard cash, Jones became a public favorite because he refused to turn professional. In 1923, after gaining considerable attention as a teenage prodigy, Jones won the U.S. Open in dramatic fashion in an 18-hole playoff with Bobby Cruikshank. On the final hole, he boldly ripped a 2-iron out of the rough, 190s over a water hazard onto the green. His ball rolled within a few feet of the hole, and he sank his putt for a one-stroke victory. Grantland Rice exulted. The red badge of courage always belongs on the breast of the fighter who can break and then come back with a stouter heart than he ever had before. This crimson decoration of valor came to Robert Tyre Jones of Atlanta, 21-year-old amateur, when he rode at last yesterday to the crest of the Open Golf Championship of the United States on one of the greatest iron shots ever played in the game that goes back through 500 years of competitive history. Over the next several years, Jones, who handled the wooden shafted clubs of his day with both finesse and power, won 12 more major tournaments at a time when amateurs could enter only a handful each year. In 1930, even Grantland Rice had trouble finding the words to describe Bobby Jones's domination of the world of golf. That year, Jones won golf's 4 most prestigious tournaments, the equivalent of today's Grand Slam, the U.S. Open, the U.S. Amateur, the British Open, and the British Amateur, bringing his total major tournament victories to 13. The U.S. Open, Masters, British Open, and PGA is the Slam today. His classic swing, fearless approach to the game, and quiet personality helped make golf a public spectacle. After winning the Grand Slam in 1930, Jones abruptly announced his retirement from competitive golf at the age of 28. He will help to found the Masters tournament in Augusta, Georgia. Rice conceded that Jones had at least 20 good years left in him, but with no new worlds to conquer, any future victories would have been nothing but anticlimax. The game of tennis had more difficulty in overcoming its elitist image. But during the 1920s, Bill Tilden and Helen Willis, as we saw, attracted considerable attention in the mainstream media. Playing at a time when standard equipment was a small wooden racket that would be dwarfed by the oversized weapons of today, Big Bill Tilden mastered every stroke. Famous for his come-from-behind victories, Tilden's court behavior often pushed the outer limits of what was supposed to be a game of gentlemen and ladies. A writer for the New Yorker described tennis's big star on the court. He will turn and glare at any lineman who dares give a decision against his judgment. Before thousands in the stands, he will demand the removal of the offender. He will request lets when the ball hits the tennis net, but it goes over into the playing court. At crucial moments, and he'll object when new balls are thrown out. When he mishit a shot, he would stand with his hands on his hips and exclaim, "Oh, peaches!" Writing in 1953 upon Tilden's death, the veteran sports writer Al Lanny recalled that Tilden was arrogant, quarrelsome, unreasonable, very hard to get along with. All in all, Tilden's tantrums made him a favorite of the press, in particular Grantland Rice, the knight of the keyboard of the 20s. Possessed of a slender body, Tilden appeared much taller than his 6'1" frame, which led to his nickname Big Bill. Biographer Frank DeFord contends that no man ever bestrode his sport as Tilden. Indeed, after becoming the first American man to win the singles title at Wimbledon in 1920, a feat he repeated the following year, Tilden proceeded to win the U.S. Open Championship in 6 consecutive years, 1920 through 25, while also leading the American Davis Cup team to the title for 7 consecutive years. At a time when the tennis establishment would only recognize amateur players, Tilden played technically as an amateur, although, like other top players, demanded substantial payments to, quote, cover expenses, unquote. In 1928, the United States Lawn Tennis Association declared him ineligible because he was being paid $25,000 a year by a newspaper syndicate to write about tennis, and the association contended that his tennis articles made him a professional. The shocking decision came on the eve of the Davis Cup matches with France, and the controversy for a time knocked the Herbert Hoover-Al Smith presidential race off the front pages. Reinstated at the last possible moment, he led the United States to victory with a dramatic 5-set victory over French star René Lacoste. Angered by the United States Lawn Tennis Association ruling and in need of money, Tilden announced the next year that he was turning professional. which meant that he played exhibition matches for pay for several years because the professional circuit was in its formative stages. His financial circumstances declining, he relocated to Los Angeles, where he taught tennis lessons, struggled with little success as a novelist and playwright, and failed to establish himself as a stage and motion picture actor. Never discreet about his homosexuality, Tilden was arrested in 1946 and convicted of contributing to the delinquency of a minor, and spent a year in prison. In 1949, he was once again arrested on the same charge and incarcerated. He died of a heart attack in 1953, alone and near penniless in a shabby Hollywood apartment.